Today, folks, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different and ranking all of the Doctor Who episodes written by Chibnall. Before we get started, there are a few things I want you to know. Firstly, I would like you to remember that this ranking is entirely my opinion. Your ranking almost certainly won't line up with mine, and that's okay, so let's just have some fun. Secondly, I want you to know that I am only looking at the Doctor Who episodes solely written by Chibnall himself, which excludes Rosa from the running. And thirdly, I want you to know that I am counting two-part episodes as one individual story, so The Hungry Earth and Cold Blood share our ranking in this list. Lastly, and most importantly, there are some spoilers that may lie ahead in this video if you continue. So, with all of that established, this leaves us with 10 episodes to rank, so without further ado, let's get started. The Saranga Conundrum comes in so far at the bottom of this list simply because it's such a dull affair. Very little happens in this episode that actually interested me. Everything going on with these supporting characters was boring, the android was not a good character, the villain was not well realized, and even our main characters didn't have a lot to do. So this whole episode just never came together. I watched it for 15 minutes and I was just sat there bored for most of it, with a couple of slightly entertaining humor moments, but that was really it. Most of the episode was quite boring. Dinosaurs on a Spaceship isn't a bad episode per se, but it's not a good one either. There's not a lot to remember from this outing. It very much feels like a filler episode from the first half of Series 7 of Doctor Who. Our characters are just kind of there, there's dinosaurs on a spaceship, the supporting cast isn't really memorable, and overall it just kind of happens. It was more entertaining than the Saranga Conundrum, but it really wasn't much to write home about, and its biggest sin is probably that it wastes David Bradley, but fortunately the show would make up for that later. The Power of 3 doesn't make it very high on this list because while it has a good premise, it never really delivers on that. I like the idea of all these cubes appearing and us not having an idea of what they're for, but when we do actually figure out what they're for, it just didn't come together that well. And I mean, honestly, the best part about this episode is really just that we have the Doctor and Amy and Rory who are just entertaining to watch, but you know, there's not much here to remember. It just has a weak climax with an interesting premise. The Hungry Earth and Cold Blood is an enjoyable episode. I remember having fun watching it. I remember enjoying these characters together. They haven't spent a lot of time on screen with each other already, but the stuff that's happening is kind of interesting, you know, and I enjoy watching these actors have fun together. And, I mean, the overall story isn't that great, but I had fun watching it, and it had a good final few moments at the end. So, overall, it was just an enjoyable episode, and I liked it. 42 seems to be an episode that people don't respond to that well. It doesn't have a lot of respect given towards it, and honestly, I kind of enjoy it. It's not great by any means. It's got some stupid stuff with the security questions, but there are some good moments in it, and I do find myself having fun watching that episode, and that's the reason that it's higher than The Hungry Earth and Cold Blood, is because I just have a decent amount of fun, and they're not that far off, but, you know, I like this episode, and I believe it was Chibnall's first, and I think he did a decent job. Arachnids in the UK is a pretty solid episode with some issues. This might seem like a high ranking to some folks, but let me explain myself. So this episode does have big spiders around Sheffield, and you know, the episode itself, the more I watch it, the more issues I have with it, like with the Donald Trump character, I forget his name, and just a bunch of stuff that just, the more I watch it, the more issues I have. But what makes this episode really stand out to me is the final few moments at the end with all the characters saying that they want to come with the Doctor and travel with her, and I really like those last couple of minutes. And the rest of the episode I find to be relatively entertaining, although it's not great. So that's why it works out higher than the other ones, is just because overall it is a pretty solid episode, but some issues. The Battle of Ranskor Ap Kolos, whose name always gets insulted for some reason, is a good episode. I did quite like it. And it is admittedly one of my lesser favorite finales, but I did think that it was good, and I enjoyed it. And I liked seeing the stuff with Graham and the Doctor, where he said he was going to try to kill Tim Shaw, and then inevitably he didn't. And I liked just seeing them confront this character again. Even though he wasn't the best villain, it was good to see them encounter somebody that they already had before. Plus, Mark Addy's in this episode, and even though his character doesn't have a ton of depth to him, Mark Addy is a really good, I guess, performer, and he does good in this episode, even though he isn't given a lot to do. So yeah, I think this is quite a good episode. The Woman Who Fell to Earth, Jodie Whittaker's first episode, and Chibnall's first episode in his new series of Doctor Who, and yeah, I thought it was solid. It's not one of the best of the Doctor Who post-regeneration stories, but it is a good Doctor Who post-regeneration story. We see Jodie Whittaker find her doctor a bit, although not completely. We're introduced to some new companions. We see the new look of the show. It looks really good. The story's pretty entertaining. The villain isn't amazing, but he works functionally in this episode, and mostly what I'm going to remember from this episode is just meeting a new doctor, which is really fun, and I like her in this episode. She doesn't stand out to me as one of the best off the bat, but she's solid, and this episode is solid, and I quite like it, although it's close with the last one. The Ghost Monument is possibly going to be one of my more controversial picks on this list. I mean, people might get upset about Arachnids being number 5, but the Ghost Monument, some people really dislike, and I kind of see why, but I gotta say, I really like this one. I like the mystery of what's going on. We see these rags in the distance, and I was like, oh, what's up with those? And we learn about the civilization that the Stenza destroyed, and it just, the atmosphere of this episode is good. The opening to this episode is really solid. There's some really good direction. There is occasionally some stupid stuff with what's going on in terms of like how they run from the spaceship and just certain things that little niggles I have with this episode where it's not perfect, but overall this is an enjoyable episode, and what I'm gonna really remember from it are those final few minutes where the Doctor meets her TARDIS, and that was just such a beautiful scene, and I just love watching that, and I think it's a really good TARDIS, and that makes the episode go from quite good to being really memorable for me. Resolution, Chris Chibnall's most recent episode, and in my opinion, his best. So this episode isn't perfect, but I do think it is a great episode. It is a great reintroduction of the Daleks. It's done so well, it's done differently, it's done in a really engaging way, and even though this episode has a couple of things that just don't work for me in terms of how they do end up defeating this Dalek, it's got so much that works that I can forgive those things. How we're introduced to this Dalek, and the way that it has a very unique story, and how it is, outside of its casing and takes over a human. It's just so many of these elements come together and work so well that it finally, gives the Doctor a threat, and we also meet Ryan's dad, who is in this episode, and we see that whole family dynamic. And then towards the end, I really thought he was going to die. The show pulled a fast on me because he didn't, and it felt like they were building up that death. But overall, this episode is just really a great reintroduction of the Dalek story, and I think it's one of the best Dalek stories that we've had in probably like 5 or 6 years or something. It's really good, and I really like it, and I think this is a good note to leave on as we wait a whole nother year or so for the next season of Doctor Who. So that's going to do it for now, folks. I had fun putting this together and trying to figure out exactly which episodes were a little bit better than the other ones. It was just a fun list to create. And do you agree with my list? The answer is you definitely don't. So please let me know your ranking of Chris Chibnall's episodes down below. I will be happy to see what other people have to think. I really suspect Arachnids in 42 possibly, and definitely Ghost Monument are going to get probably lower in other people's lists, but I'll be interested to see where those all come in your rankings. So yeah, please let me know that. I will be back again next Sunday with a review of Marco Polo, a lost First Doctor episode. And if you're interested in Game of Thrones reviews, I have, I believe, 3 out already for this season, and I am coming out with a 4th one, hopefully Wednesday or Thursday, depending on how soon I can get that out. But yeah, if you would like, then join me for some of that. But if not, that's fine, because you've joined me now, and I appreciate that. So thank you for that. So that's going to do it for now, folks. Thank you for watching. Take care, and have a lovely week.